If I were to say to you, as a Jew, that the experience of Jews in the United States today is worse than the experience of Jews in Europe in 1939, I would not be stating accurately. Correct. It's not true. And it's also not true to say that the experience of black people in America in 2024 is worse on a general level than the experience of black men in 1954 in Alabama. That's just crazy.
I'm not sure what timeline we are living in, but on a recent episode of Bill Maher, Ben Shapiro teamed up with Bill to take down this far-left guest over a debate about systemic racism, where the left-wing guy tries to claim that systemic racism today is worse than it was in 1960. Which is just a really stupid argument, okay? It reminds me of like some of these 2016 videos of Ben Shapiro on the college campuses, but let's react to it here today, and Bill Maher also chimes in. So that said, folks, if you enjoy our content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so I can keep producing videos like this. Without further ado, let's just get right into this. Check it out.
I'm talking about systemic racism, and most times—
Has it gotten worse since 1960?
Yes, actually.
Systemic racism has gotten worse since Jim Crow.
Yes, so you want me to give you a stat? Black home ownership today is less than it was pre-Fair Housing Act of 1968. But let me also talk about the fact that
being the welfare state.
Let me also tell you this. A lot of times when we talk about racism, we only talk about the fact when somebody calls you, but very rarely do we talk about the systems of injustice and oppression we have in this country. Where I'm from, Denmark, South Carolina, you don't have clean water. Right? I live in a food desert, or grew up in a food desert where you can't go a mile or two and have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. The schools are falling apart. The infrastructure is eroding.
But Kari, is your life as a black man better or worse than it would have been if you had been born in 1920 in the United States?
Well, all you have to do is ask my father.
I mean, on the front of home ownership, it is a valid concern to have, but to pretend like that's because the policies or the systems have become even more unfavorable to black people than they were in 1968, that is just straight up ridiculous, okay? And on the front of poverty, it's like, okay, that's called poverty. You know, it's not just black people that are affected by it, but of course, apparently we're only supposed to care. It's only a thing when black people are affected by it. I don't know. Let's hear out the argument.
Do is ask my father, who literally was shot in the Orangeburg Massacre, right? Who helped found SNCC, who marched with Marion Barry and Stokely Carmichael and Martin Luther King, and the list goes on and on and on. And he will tell you today that he feels like this country's at 1954. And so if you want to talk about somebody—
That doesn't mean it is.
Well,
Exactly. My dad says he feels this way, therefore it is true across the entire country. That's a ridiculous argument. But, it is kind of emblematic of all of the arguments about systemic racism. They chase ghosts, right? They just say these vague things about, I feel this way, the systems, the structures, which one specifically I couldn't tell you. That's how it always goes.
You said he feels that way. That's ridiculous. It is.
I think the ridiculous notion is for either one of you all to have the audacity to believe that you understand what the experience is to be.
I have to object to that.
But you just said
I cannot talk about it because I am not part of a group. I am a sentient human being. You're right. There's two ways you cannot understand something. One is to be too far from it. We're too far from it. We can't see like you can. One is to be too close to something. And then sometimes you can't see it accurately either.
And by the way, wasn't his argument about systemic racism? Isn't that what he just said? Systemic, not individual, not personal, not what I went through in my life, but systemic racism. So how can your experiences as one man or two men, including your father, determine what systemic racism is like across the entire country? You are not the entire system, right? The entire system would be nationwide. So in that case, it is a debate over objective facts, right? Statistics, stuff like that. But individual experiences cannot prove systemic racism. Systemic is literally in the word. It doesn't make sense.
I'm not too close to something. I am that.
I know.
And so, but what I am saying though is for you to discount my father's experience and say
I'm not discounting it.
And to say it was silly.
I'm not.
No, he was shot.
No
Were
shit.
you shot?
No, but he's still alive. Like he's right here. Like,
right, but the idea that if I were to say to you, as a Jew, that the experience of Jews in the United States today is worse than the experience of Jews in Europe in 1939, I would not be stating accurately. Correct. It's not true.
That's
It's also not true to say that the experience of black people in America in 2024 is worse on a general level than the experience of black men in 1954 in Alabama. That's just crazy.
I also think that that's decently intellectually dishonest. And that's my my problem with it. I think that's genuinely intellectually dishonest, because when we go through the litany of not just imagine. So, for example, one of my major political issues is African American female mortality, right? If you want to talk about structural racism, did you know, I'm sure you do, but black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth than white women.
That's also true in Europe, by the way.
But we're talking about the United States of America.
I know, but the problem is you have to have a control.
It's also true in Africa, by the way, which may suggest, okay, I might get canceled for this or whatever, but it's kind of how biology works sometimes. Maybe it's a genetic thing, right? I'm Vietnamese. We are more prone to high blood pressure. It runs heavily in my family a lot. I know, for instance, this is something I remember from biology class, that black men tend to be more prone to sickle cell anemia. So, you know, we should do the best we can to improve medicine and all that. But how do you necessarily know that high black infant mortality rate has anything to do with racism or the racist distribution of doctors or the healthcare system? There's no proof of that, right? It could have something to do with genetics or health or whatever. But what kind of argument is that? So far, the arguments of Bakari Sellers have been, number one, my dad feels this way, and how dare you discount his experience on it, which is obviously kind of the average left-wing argument about racism. I feel like this is true, therefore you must bend all of society to my demands. And then number two, something he has no proof has any link to actual systemic racism, because it could just be a biological thing or a health thing or a genetic thing. Whatever it is, you don't know, right? And I don't think anyone really knows so far.
We do have a control.
Well, no,
and
your statistical control.
And so tell me why that is.
Okay, the answer is because black people in the United States have a lower household income, median household income, which means they typically go to hospitals.
I would call bull that actually crosses across socioeconomic lines. So you can be my wife, who almost died during childbirth. You can be Serena Williams, who almost died during childbirth.
So what's your answer?
What is?
So again, maybe it's like a health thing that is more prominent among African Americans, okay? And you know, people are gonna say it's some type of like racist argument. No, right? In the same way you inherit many of the characteristics of your parents genetically, including potentially chronic illness or health problems they may have. This is the reason why they say it runs in the family. I'm not saying it's true. I've never done the research on this, but if it's true that at low socioeconomic and high socioeconomic in a bunch of different countries, black women tend to have a higher infant mortality rate, maybe it's something like that. Again, I don't know, but this guy is pretending to have the answer and the proof that has anything to do with racism when he has no proof of that. He has no evidence of that whatsoever.
Because actually,
white doctors are racist?
No, but there actually is implicit bias in our healthcare delivery system. And there have been medical studies that show that people respond to the pain of black women differently than they respond to the pain of white women.
Yeah, I believe that.
That literally is a fact. And so I am trying to help both of you all understand that sometimes there are systems in place that just treat people differently.
So that, for example, would have nothing to do with the rates of, say, pregnant obesity by various communities. There are many confounds when it comes to these particular issues. And unless you remove the statistical confounds, you end up with trying to blame vague, shadowy figures like implicit bias, which are innately, insanely difficult, if not impossible, to measure.
I don't know what he just said.
Okay, what he just said is essentially that it's a complicated issue. It's partially a medical issue. And you're claiming that implicit bias, which means, oh, the doctors are racist or they're responding differently to the pain of black women, is the sole reason that the infant mortality rate is higher when there's no evidence of what you're saying, okay? But in conclusion here, again, just your average sort of argument in regards to systemic racism. They never can point to one concrete thing. It's always some vague, weird, shadowy issue, right? If there is a socioeconomic gap between races, don't mind the reason. That means it's because of systemic racism. If his father had issues in his life, this proves that in 2024, America is systemically racist. What a silly argument. It goes on and on. But that said, folks, let me know your thoughts on this debate in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, follow me on X, link in the description, and until next time, God bless and peace.